Last night in Washington, D.C., a Democratic member of Congress was carjacked by three men. Henry Cuellar, carjacked at gunpoint in Washington. The question I have for you, my friends, is do you feel any sympathy for these individuals who either are soft on crime, push soft on crime policies, advocate for a culture that lets criminals out of jail, and at the same time advocates that J6ers, the nonviolent ones, get harsh and serious sentences? This is a tweet put up by Mike Cernovich saying no sympathy, in fact, quite the opposite. And I have to wonder, this was only a few blocks away from Congress. A Democratic member of Congress was carjacked, car stolen. This is not the only story I have for you, because I think the question I have is best described by Jack Posobiec, best articulated, is what is happening? We got news the other day that this far leftist in Philadelphia who was mocking Mike Cernovich, mocking Scott Adams, when both of them said that there is a chance you could die based on the political climate, this individual mocked them and only a day or so later was brutally murdered in his own home. We now have another story. A man in Philadelphia, I believe it was Philly, was standing with his girlfriend. He was a far left advocate, and some guy randomly, seemingly for no reason, walked up to him, stabbed him twice in the chest, killing him. My friends, the first thing I want to say to all of you is please, please, please give yourself a 10-minute first aid YouTube session. Like just watch any YouTube video on basic survival, basic first aid, etc. Honestly, you should be doing more than that, because it freaks me out and it's horrifying. Likely what happened with this guy in Philly, and he's a far leftist. I'm sure he's got a bunch of weird policies for supporting Democrats, which lead to this stuff. People are calling him Bolshevik. I don't want anybody dying. I don't want this violence to increase. And that's the whole point of videos that I do. It's the whole point of everything that I'm talking about when it comes to crime. Yet we want to balance freedoms, but let's be real. The policies that are taking over in these big cities are leading to massive surges in crime. This idea, this guy who lost his life in Philly, has this idea that you can bring in these drug treatment centers, open, what are they? He wants to do safe injection sites. I'm sorry, dude. I understand. You want to help these people who are addicted. I certainly do as well. Safe injection sites, in my understanding, I could be wrong about this, but from what I've seen, at least where I am, it leads to more crime, more distress. We need to get these people off the drugs, not give them places to do them. And I'm sure that's your argument. I don't think it's working. I don't want this guy to lose his life. But I got to say, when you look at all of this stuff, those of us who are paying attention to what's going on have gotten out of these places or understand at the very least what we must do to protect ourselves. But I want to state, I don't know exactly how this dude died. But if it turns out to be what's called a sucking chest wound, it is always brutal when you hear these stories because you didn't have to. I'm not a doctor. I've only taken a few first aid emergency courses and hostile environment courses. I've done some very basic training, not to the extent of like the military, but I've done very, very rudimentary first aid kit, tourniquet, sucking chest wound, all of these things. And it's crazy because what they say is this dude got stabbed twice in the chest. Likely what happened is it created a cavity in his chest so that when he tried to inhale, his lungs would not actually pull air in. Again, not a doctor. All I know is this. If you get stabbed in the chest, what you're supposed to do is you got to seal that so air can't get in. So when you inhale, air actually enters your lungs and leaves your lungs. Because if you have a wound, it creates a cavity and then no air is actually coming in. And that's why you die so quickly. I've heard too many stories about this in my life. No, seriously. Where it's like a dude gets stabbed in the chest or shot in the chest and they're like, oh no, he died. And it's like, man, there are things you can do other than you just like literally holding it and sealing it. You take a piece of plastic, anything, and then you seal it on three sides and that creates a vent which can actually release the pressure. Again, not a doctor. All I'm telling you is I once went to, I went to like 3 different courses which had training on this, and it's like over a short period. Let's read the news and break down what is going on, man. Why are these people dying? And I want to tell you too, The other story about that CEO in Baltimore, we got new information. Young woman woke in Baltimore. She got murdered on her roof. Guess what the story is? This convicted sex offender was stalking her, following her home. She goes into her lobby, hears him knock or something, turns around, door's closed. She's right there, her elevator. She could get to safety right now. But no, she doesn't. She turns around and sees a large, strange man waving through the window, and she walks over and opens the door for him. He gets in the elevator with her, brings her to the roof, and brutally murders her. This is why we have security, dude. Let me read the news for you. We'll get into all this stuff. ABC News reports Democratic Texas Rep. Henry, is it pronounced Cuellar? I know the two L's are yes. Henry Cuellar was carjacked at gunpoint Monday night near his residence in the Navy Yard area of Washington, D.C., just blocks from the Capitol. An alert sent to congressional members said 3 to 4 men held guns to his head and took his car and phone. Cuellar's chief of staff, Jacob Hochberg, confirmed the carjacking news in a statement to ABC News late Monday night. As Congressman Cuellar was parking his car this evening, 3 armed assailants approached the congressman and stole his vehicle. Luckily, he was not harmed and is working with local law enforcement. Thank you to Metro PD and Capitol Police for their swift action and for recovering the congressman's vehicle, his statement read. And here's a picture of the congressman. The Metropolitan Police Department of D.C. did not confirm their identity, saying there was a report of an armed carjacking around 9:32 p.m. in the intersection of New Jersey and K Street. Yo, that's K Street, man. Yo, K Street is the street. That's what they call it. They call it K Street. Lobbyists, big shots, billionaires, millionaires, meeting, wheeling and dealing. Yo, this is crazy stuff. But hey, man, if you want to advocate for these policies, well, you reap what you sow, I guess. You reap what you sow. Now, take a look at this tweet from Mike Lee. Based Mike Lee, U.S. Senator for Utah, says, my friend Rep. Cuellar became the victim of a crime tonight in what's considered a nice part of D.C. D.C. is dangerous. Something's gone terribly wrong here for far too long. Congress has the sole power to make D.C.'s laws and must intervene. Hear, hear, good sir. I completely agree. I just want to point out that crime takes place in nice neighborhoods. That's basically where they take place. It's a weird thing I think people don't realize. You know, if there's crime in poor neighborhoods, for sure, but it's not like this. If somebody wants to steal from you, are they going to go to a poor neighborhood and steal from the poor person who lives next to them? Sometimes they do, it happens, but they don't get a whole lot. A lot of carjackings and muggings are people from poor neighborhoods. They intentionally go to wealthier areas where people are relaxed and think everything's fine, and this is what happens. Now, I got to admit, going within a few blocks of Congress, that takes balls right there. Well, Mike Cernovich says, your friend and other radical Dems and many Republicans wanted J6 grandmas tossed in gulags. So that's what DC AUSAs are doing, instead of prosecuting real crime. These are choices Democrats made about enforcement priorities. It was a choice. No sympathy. The opposite. You know what, man? I get it. I don't want anybody getting carjacked. But hey, what am I going to say? These were choices made by Democrats. Who should we be going after? Should we go after street crime? Nah, we should let these poor oppressed people out of jail and lock up women who are running cafes during lockdown. What's that? You're a barber in Michigan? We're going to lock you up. What's that? You're a salon owner in Texas? They locked up a salon owner in Texas. And then after a big backlash, released her. Those are the priorities. In Texas, I'm not talking about a Democrat state, but this is the priorities. These are the priorities of many Democrats. Oh, yeah, sure. Nancy Pelosi can come out and say, we have to lock down. And then what does she do? She doesn't put her mask on and she goes and gets her hair cut when no one else can. You wanted this world, you get to live in it. This is a big story that we saw just the other day. That, man, I am sad to hear that this happened. But guys, I've been telling you, okay? If Democrats abort their kids, sterilize their kids, if Democrats advocate for soft on crime policies that result in death, I don't see anything other than us winning the culture war. And you can talk all about indoctrination. You can talk all about prosecuting Trump. And I'm like, none of that matters. The impact on a culture, on a society, on a civilization through reproduction is paramount. nothing else matters. You can argue, people can argue that, yeah, but they're indoctrinating our kids. My friends, the indoctrination of your kids is stamp collecting compared to having children, okay? You are basically saying having kids is the Nobel Prize winning nuclear physics of civilization, and teaching kids bad things in schools is stamp collecting. Now, I know people often like to bring up these anecdotes. They say, yeah, but you look at like Elon Musk, his kids woke, and you look at Kellyanne Conway. That's what we talked about last night. And I'm like, anecdotes. We can see in the data. Now, don't get me wrong. Social media itself is a powerful influence. But when parents start waking up and advocating for changes that causes Democrats to freak out, Democrats are not having kids. They're sterilizing their kids. They're advocating for policies that result in crime in their areas. And they are battling a culture war on education that I believe they're losing. So, yes, I think it's fair to say that culture and socialization, indoctrination matter, but we are in a culture war over these things. So if you have, let's put it this way, two sides in a war. One side is constantly resupplying its front lines and weapons with attrition. It's degrading, but they are resupplying to the best of their abilities. The other side is not resupplying. Sure, you're in a conflict. Sure, you can argue, but they've got weapons and they're attacking us. But the attrition's going to wipe them out. Look, I'm talking about the ideology, not the human beings, okay? Because many of these people are going to change their tunes and they're going to start supporting policies that actually enforce this stuff because their friends are being killed. And that's when the right dominates in the culture war, because more and more people are going to start voting for Donald Trump. They're going to vote for someone who says, I'm going to bring in the police. We're going to get this under control. And what do you think these people are going to say? These far left hippy-dippy people, you know what they're going to do? They're going to pull a Liz Lemon like in 30 Rock. In one of the first, it's like the first season in 30 Rock, Tina Fey, Saturday Night Live, city urban liberal lady. Her character says, I tell everyone I voted for Obama, but I actually voted for McCain. How many people do you know that are probably going to do that? These people who fear social ostracization more than being murdered in their own home. What they will do is they will lie and secretly vote for Donald Trump. That's what they call it, the secret Trump voter. Journalist shot 7 times in Philadelphia home. 2 days before his murder, Josh Kruger mocked Dilbert creator Scott Adams' warning of rising crime. This is brutal. Look at this. Andy No highlights this guy's tweets. He says, leftist journalist and activist Josh Kruger has been tragically shot dead at his Philadelphia home. Kruger has long downplayed gun violence in his city and publicly chastised others who spoke about it. Tweet after tweet after tweet. I mean, the craziest thing. Scott Adams says, if Biden is elected, there's a good chance you will be dead within the year. He then said Republicans will be hunted. I think Scott took a more political approach to what he meant by you'll be dead within a year. But I also think a large component of what he was talking about was the escalation in crime. We were coming off of the BLM riots where they were going around smashing things and 30 plus people died. Look at this. About 2 weeks ago, Josh Kruger wrote on Facebook that someone came to his house searching for their boyfriend, a man I've never met once in my entire life. The person called themselves Lady Diablo, the she-devil of the streets, and threatened him, he wrote. So what do you think happened? He said, get out of my house, and they said, we're going to come back for you. Or the person looking for their boyfriend was scoping out his house. This is what they do, man. You might come outside on your house one day and you'll notice someone marked your house in some weird way. There's a number written on it. And you're like, what is this? And so you wipe it off or you ignore it. They put marks on houses when they follow you home. They see if you live alone by yourself. They look up the kind of person you are. Dude, I'm telling you, I bet they look this guy up. Let me just say this. There is a possibility. This guy's high profile enough. They look up his posts and they're like, he's soft on crime. He's anti-gun. He's a leftist or whatever. He might have a gun. I'm not sure. But if you're going to target someone, this is who you're going to target. This is who these people are going after. The people who publicly announce they're unarmed and they don't believe in weapons. James O'Keefe had this. It was a while ago he did this. They went door to door claiming to be anti-gun activists or like gun safety advocates. And then he knocks on the door and he's like, we want common sense gun control. Do you agree? And they're like, yes, absolutely. And he goes, do you own a gun? They're like, no, we don't. He's like, would you be willing to put this sign in your yard saying proud gun-free home so we can let people know that we do not need guns? And they're like, what? No. That's like inviting people to come in. It's like, wait a minute. He's like, wait, are you saying you actually need the guns? And they're like, well, I just don't want people. That's right. You see, a lot of people get by on the fact that there is a fear they may have a gun. But as they remove that capability from you, this is what happens. Let us advance in the news. Daily news. Advocate stabbed to death by unhinged stranger while waiting for Brooklyn bus with girlfriend. I don't know that this guy is some far-left Antifa lunatic. And I am not saying as such. The other dude, Kruger, was mocking people who were saying, like, crime is getting bad. That's a scary story, man. Karma's real, dude. I don't know. Believe whatever you want to believe. But that's brutal. I don't want that guy to get hurt, right? He's just saying dumb things on the internet. This guy I don't know much about. I know he's had some stuff where he's criticized Scott Adams. He is a leftist. He's advocated for safe injection sites and things like that. And I can understand his point of view, but I don't know much about him. So I'm not going to accuse him of being a nasty Antifa guy, but he is a leftist who advocates for policies that result in unhinged strangers being in his neighborhood. I hate to say it, man. I appreciate the people who are thinking like, we got people who are addicted and we can reduce transmission of disease and we can help get them off drugs if we give them a safe place to do these drugs. It's better than crack houses and drug dens and things like that. But all that happens is you are creating more opportunity. Let me tell you the story that many of you probably heard about India. So they got a bunch of snakes, right? And there's snakes all over. And they're like, these snakes are a problem. So the government goes, everyone, listen up. We figured out a really great way to deal with the snakes. Decentralization. You bring us a snakehead and we will pay you, $5. Sounds like a good idea, right? Create opportunity for people to give incentive to get rid of these snakes. What do? They started breeding the snakes because all they said was a snake was worth $5. So the people were like, catch them, breed them, and then we'll keep bringing them in. Free money. Made the problem substantially worse. My friend, you advocate for spaces where people are doing drugs and are not well. You are not advocating for an institution where these people are not free to leave. Maybe that's what you need. Safe injection site, but you can't leave. We bring you in and we lock the door. And then you will be institutionalized until we can get you clean. I'm not saying that's exactly what we should do. I'm saying if you're going to advocate for it, that's what's got to be. Otherwise, you create opportunity. More people come. More people say it's easier to do now. You make it easier for them. Then one of these crazy dudes who is now in your area because you created a safe place for them to do drugs and they're already unstable, walks up to you for no reason and stabs you twice in the chest. It's tragedy, man. It's horrifying. Well, take a look at some of these tweets. Jack Posobiec asks, what is happening? This guy tweeted, hey, Scott Adams, you give me 1/1000th of your personal wealth to NOODNY campaign, and I'll show you some transformative social change. This is not a tweet of a dude insulting Scott Adams, saying something, this is a guy who's saying like, hey, you want to see change? Like, hook me up and I'll bring about change. That's what I'm saying. I don't see this guy as the same as the first dude. Budding policy influencer Ryan Carson was stabbed multiple times in the chest by an unhinged man while waiting for the bus with his girlfriend. NY Perg campaign director, one of the rising stars in the org, boisterous laugh, everybody loved him. All right. I have experience with the public interest research groups, Perg. I think they're shady and untrustworthy. That's my opinion, having worked for some of their affiliates. I think that my personal opinion, having worked in the office, was that what I experienced was a bunch of people who didn't actually care about any of these progressive causes, and it was a sales office. That's what it was. It was fundraising. I don't know what he did. Campaign director. What that says to me is that if you're a PERG campaign director, it likely means that he ran an office. Look at this. You can see behind him. Is that, that looks like it might be New York, NY, Environment, NY or something. I would imagine this guy was a fundraiser who called people and pitched them on donating cash. That's what I did. And I found most of the nonprofits, that's all they were interested in. But hey, look, man, it doesn't matter. This guy should not have lost his life. And this is what we are actually fighting against. We are fighting against unhinged criminals doing these things. So it's a tragedy when you hear a victim was taken by a crazed man. And you know what? A lot of people are going to say, we are the light, fighting through the darkness to clean up the streets and give people, even our enemies, a better life. But he represents the darkness, this masquerading as good, but destroying everything around them. I am not saying that is what is truly happening. Everybody thinks they're right. But I'm saying there are many people who are going to look at this and say he was an agent of the darkness. He was an agent of the negative, of the chaos and the destruction, and he reaped what he has sown. Perhaps, but I still don't think this man should have lost his life. And if the policies I want to get implemented, and the policies you want, we would save this man's life. That's the point, so that he doesn't have to suffer. That's the crazy thing, right? This, for many people on the right who are religious, I'm not a Christian, but I see that it's really funny that Christ-like mission that somebody on the right have. Yes, the left are evil, but we're trying to save them. And I'm like, man, respect, tremendous. Because my attitude's always been much more like, hey, look, man, if they're sterilizing their kids and aborting their kids, I mean, and you're fighting against them and they're winning these policies in their states, what do? And I've often said it's fascinating to me how conservatives are desperately trying to save the lives of those who are making the world worse. And I'm like, that is a very Christ-like thing to do, isn't it? And I'm not saying people who are not Christian, who are atheists, are incapable of such sympathy or empathy. I'm just making that point that it's funny. The right is trying so desperately to save the people who are basically burning these things down. Wilford Riley said, I'm not going to laugh or gloat about this, but literally about 6 prominent leftists have been robbed on up this week, due basically to urban crime policies they supported. Yeah, and this was a response to Henry Cuellar. Jack Basovic says Josh Kruger had like 1,000 tweets defending no bail when it came to Philly criminals, but laughed about J6ers getting detained for years with no trial. This one, I think I might have to just do a follow-up full segment on this one, because there's so much to this story. The woman, the female tech CEO, she got murdered. I'm going to do a dedicated segment on this story, and I'll save it for later in the day. But this murderer, this convicted sex offender, followed her to her house. She opened the door, letting him in. You know why I think she did it? I think she was like, I'm not racist. This strange man approaches the glass. She has no idea who he is, and he waves, and she opens the door. What's the point of having a lock on your door if you're going to let in a stranger? I never do that. I was staying at my buddy's place, and they have a gate. So the apartment is, when you walk into the complex, it's an open, what do you call it? Like this, the building is shaped like a large opening in the middle. There's no front door. It's a gate, and then each apartment has a front door in this gated off area. And I walk to it, and there's a person like, hey, can you let me in? I forgot my keys. I'm like, sorry, man. No, I can't. Like, it's like, oh, dude, I live here, bro. I'm like, that sucks. I was like, dude, are you kidding? If you really lived here, you'd be pissed off if someone you didn't know started opening the door and letting strangers in. And apparently the dude did live there. And he was like, no, I get it, man. It's cool. He wasn't pissed off about it. I don't care if he is. I'm like, bro, first of all, it's my friend's place. I'm not about to let strangers in. That's a crazy idea. You know, when I worked for O'Hare Airport, they had to say 500 times a day, do not let people in behind you. If you open the door and someone's waiting behind you, you close it and you wave, and then they have to swipe in. Never let someone walk in behind you. And part of it was because when you swipe your ID, they track who's going through what doors and stuff like that. You know, this lady was like, here's a guy I don't know, better let him in. And I think it was because she didn't want to be racist. I think this is the mentality these people have. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your gender is. I don't care if you're an 80-year-old little old Asian lady. You're knocking on the door, bag lady, I ain't letting you in. Sorry. But so many people do like, oh, you know, no. Mike Cernovich is an art. I want to come back to that one and do a bigger read on it. But I really wanted to get to this. The return of the Bolsheviks, the other side of fear from Mike Cernovich. I want to read you some of this. Because Mike, I'm sorry, dude. I said his tweets are a bit aggressive. And what I mean by that is you want to approach somebody who's not aware of what's going on. You come out and you say something pretty intense, and they're going to be like, you're crazy. But I don't think Mike's wrong. He says, we learned communism wrong. History class and popular discourse focused on the socialism aspect of the Soviet Union, leading us all to a false discourse of choosing capitalism or communism, as if communism were merely an economic system instead of a demonically inspired chaos. Yeah. He says, midway through the article, I stopped to rewrite it to make it less conceptual and more personal. Recently, I tweeted, when we lose in 2024, I'll be hunted down and murdered by the regime. Have already had this talk with my family. All these goober conservatives think they'll be okay. They won't. Look up the Bolshevik Revolution. Y'all going to be imprisoned, and you people have no clue. He said, this was widely mocked by many conservatives and thousands upon thousands of ish-libs, with insults ranging from you are not that important to you're paranoid and belong in an institution. One such person making the latter remark was executed in his own home. That's right. Kruger insulted Mike Cernovich saying, no, but I think involuntary psychiatric detention is a possibility, but for purely normal everyday reasons, not political. Sure. He wants Cernovich locked up. And then, what was it, a couple days later, he was killed. What Josh Kruger didn't understand, much like the theater goers referenced in the opening quote, is that we are not spectators of the neo-Bolsheviks, but instead we will be victims and involuntary participants. I did not read the Gulag Archipelago, I always pronounce it wrong. But I have read one passage that was prominently shared where he talks about, Solzhenitsyn talks about how there was a military officer who was confronted by a man who had a knife to his neck. And he fought and stabbed the guy attacking him. He was arrested and criminally charged. And in the prosecution, he says the man was threatening, he had a knife to threaten to my neck to kill me. What should I have done? And the prosecutor said, flee. Yep. That's New Jersey. I was told by the police that if I'm in my home in New Jersey and someone breaks in with a gun, I have an obligation to jump out the window before I'm allowed to defend myself. That's the world they're building. And that's the world Josh Kruger was building. Look at this. He says, Rep. Cori Bush got shot at in St. Louis. Rep. Mary Gay Scanlon got carjacked. Rep. Angie Craig attacked in her home. Rand Paul staffer stabbed. And guess what? I tweeted this. I bet Mike Cernovich is lighting up a cigar. Maybe not right now, but he's getting ready to put his feet up, have a nice cup, a nice scotch and a cigar as he reads that Cuellar that night was carjacked. Not to gloat, but to just to be, it's almost like, man, was I right or was I right? Rand Paul himself supported criminal justice reform, even partnering with neo-Bolshevik Cory Booker. Members of Congress are victims of their soft-on-crime delusions. People like Josh think he's writing about the times when we are living and dying in it. Now many have said that people are jumping the gun by assuming Josh was killed by a random person, and that totally misses the point. Once you create a culture of lawlessness and unaccountability that trickles down, would-be murderers know you've been disarmed, or that you might not take that shot in legal self-defense due to the reasonable fear that a Soros DA will indict you. And not just that. It's not even about the political. It is quite literally just when you create a system of chaos and crime, the chaos and crime finds its way to you. It's like Batman even. The story is that, Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, they were progressives. They believed in the people of Gotham and they're trying to help the poor. And then he gets shot and killed. I know there's a lot more to the lore than that. And people are going to be, how dare you insult Thomas Wayne? He was based. No, look, man. You sit around hippy-dippy signs like that. We're going to help people. And then someone knocks on your window and they're like, hey, I forgot my keys. And you're like, I'm going to do the right thing and let in this man because I'm here to help. And then he punches you in the face and murders you. That's not what the guy did in that story, by the way. He laughed and talked with her, went in the elevator, forced her to the roof where, yeah, you get the point. I'll spare you the details. But she died. You cannot escape this hellhole world by being created by Soros, Biden, and even mainstream Democrats. He says, under the Bolsheviks, your punishment for having a knife when they searched you would be very different from the thieves. For him to have a knife was a mere misbehavior, tradition. He didn't know any better. But for you, it was terrorism. That was part of the story when the guy said, I had to defend myself. See, the criminal doesn't know any better. The poor criminal must be helped. But you, upstanding citizen, you should know better. Don't protect yourself. Self-defense is illegal in Texas. Who remembers the case in Texas where a man went to prison for defending himself against an armed, violent revolutionary? A Soros DA convicted an active duty service member and Uber driver, Daniel Perry, for defending himself against this man. That's right. A dude walked up to Daniel Perry with his weapon in hand, low ready, and pointing it in down towards the car. He sees this guy walking up with his hand low ready, and he shoots at him. Prison. That's Texas. Who remembers Daniel Penny? Red values, blue hellholes, Cernovich writes. Soros DA, like his spiritual predecessors, released criminals while imprisoning law-abiding citizens. The people on the train said that Penny saved their lives that day. Doesn't matter. They're going to lock him up. Mike says, how bad is it going to get really? I was talking to some dads at the park, and one of them was starting to really get it. He's a nice guy and not someone you'd expect to understand where the country is at. The other dad is a friend and longtime reader. We got to the topic of how you can live knowing what's coming. In the short term, CCW is critical, concealed carry, and is good training. And living in a country where the sheriff will enforce the law, DA will arrest criminals and not indict you for self-defense. It's reassuring that men are waking up. One of the dads said, 10 years ago, I'd have walked away from this conversation and said, you're a crank. Now I'm here and we all understand what's happening. It can't be denied. Criminal gangs arriving via open the border, monetary policy causing inflation, insurance increases, health car, you name it. It's all up, gas back to $7. We even talked how people in cars are losing it as a result of back-breaking financial woes caused by the regime. Brace for impact. Regular readers know that despair is demonic. Sitting around doomsdaying is also usually a LARP by people who are convinced they'll be warlords once a comet hits, even though they've yet to find meaningful success in this world. Also, there was 2 decades of wars. Talk to your bros who ran missions if anarchy and chaos is a desired situation. It is not. I can't even speak to that. I can only tell you about being in places like Egypt. And that was for a couple weeks when I was watching that revolution unfold. I don't even think that long, like 8 days or something. And it's not a place you want to be in. Looking down from my hotel, seeing APCs drive around with people screaming, shooting at each other. I was like, guys, we got to get out. I am not a war correspondent. I cover urban conflict and civil unrest to the point of civil war. And when it becomes war, that's when I know I lack the capabilities to handle this. And I have no problem saying that. Only a fool would stand there and be like, I can handle a war zone. Yeah, I only left because, I had to come. No way. I have no problem saying outright, my capabilities end when it becomes warfare. It's a riot in the streets. I know how to handle tear gas and people shooting guns. Active multi-faction conflict with APCs, bridges being shut down, ain't for me. I don't have that capabilities. You need somebody with probably military background who has gotten out and started working in the journalism field and can do security and knows how to handle these things. I certainly do not. That's an important thing to recognize, what your capabilities really are. Self-defense training is no longer optional. Dad or mom, cardio for the I'm too busy crowd, and that's where it wraps. But I recommend checking out Cernovich. He's not wrong. And we do the show last night with Dave Rubin and Luke, and they're talking about how great Florida is, and Dave saying there's no crime. That is not true. Look, I got no problem telling you that Florida is doing great. And politically, I'm impressed. But, they've got bad neighborhoods everywhere. And I'm not saying it's getting as bad as everywhere else. In fact, it's probably getting better. But that being said, you need to take crime seriously. Now, for the rest of us who don't live in Florida, depending on where you live, if you're adjacent to a blue state or otherwise, this is what Democrats are bringing about. They're getting carjacked themselves. So I don't know. We don't want to be extremists, but what do you say when you got 2 high-profile leftists, moderately, like activists, I should say, of profile, public figures, being killed in a matter of a couple days? A Democrat getting carjacked. This stuff is getting crazier and crazier. It's not about civil war. It's about crime on the rise. But I will say this. Understand, when I talk about civil war, I am not saying the freedom faction states hereby decree against the establishment forces, the new Mason-Dixon, and then they're marching down the streets in their uniforms and they're goose-stepping or whatever it is. That's ridiculous. Civil war, when society breaks down. When people start to think the police don't enforce the law, what happens? When you look at those roving bands of mobs in Philly, the biggest we've seen, 100+ people smashing up stores and stealing whatever they want. They're doing it because in their minds, the police can't stop them. My life growing up, and in many countries, the police have the monopoly on violence. You can't win against them. You do as you're told. That's it. The reason why you comply with police, they got the monopoly. The court systems, all of them, back them. You win through the process by which we are afforded by the Constitution and by our legal precedent. It's difficult and sometimes unjust. But you don't fight the people who quite literally, these cops shoot people and then say, I was scared for my life. And often it's like, well, okay, that's what we expect of them. Here's what happens now. I'm saying you don't physically fight them. Don't do that. That's stupid. What's happened now is you have a generation of young people that do not believe the police have the authority to do anything. So the way you understand it is this. Imagine you see a bunch of clowns. I'm serious. 7 clowns walking down the street, and they have rifles. The only thing that is going to make you follow their orders is that they're armed and you are not. A group of clowns, and they come to your house and say, we're out of the way. We're searching your house for contraband. You'd be like, what? Who are you guys? The guys with weapons. You're being robbed, right? You're being robbed. See, when the police do it, you're like, this is the system by which we live, and we have pushback. We believe law enforcement has restrictions. Because of these restrictions, we actually grant them some leeway, and we respect the rules to a degree. It's a bit fair. You got to get a warrant. You got a warrant, fine. It sucks, sometimes unjust. But what's happening now is these people in places like Philly and San Francisco see the cops, and they look at the cops like clowns. Clowns who aren't even armed half the time. And the clown walks up and says, you can't take that phone. And they go, get out of here, clown. My point is this. You look at a cop, you see authority. They look at a cop, they see a clown. Would you listen to a clown when the clown gives you instructions? No. Understand. That is my point. This is how revolution and civil war begins. Not everywhere, not all the time. I'm saying it is a open door. When you have people in the suburbs of Philly, let's say there's a town 40 miles outside of Philly, and crime is running rampant, and roving bands are going to neighborhoods and robbing things. What do? You have to create your own neighborhood watch. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying people will be like, we got to protect ourselves. These cops ain't doing it for us. What happens then? When the riots break out, the police circle the wagons around government and not you. When multiple factions start popping up to protect their own homes and neighborhoods because law enforcement no longer exists and is not functioning, what then happens when the cops come in their neighborhood and say, hand in your guns, you guys have too many? They say, you don't have authority. You don't protect us. We protect us. I don't even know who you are. When there is no more confidence in law enforcement, then you'll just get mini warlords. Now, I don't know when or how or what happens, but pay attention to this stuff. Maybe we're all wrong. Fine, so be it. I'd appreciate it if I was. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.